Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for joining us for this retirement savings webinar. I'm Michael Metzger from UniSaver, and with me is financial journalist and author Mary Holm. Mary, kia ora.
Kia ora, Michael.
Thanks for joining us. And thank you for those of you that sent in questions. You can also ask questions during the webinar, and we'll get to those if we can. There's plenty to be going on with, so we'll jump right in. The first question is about UniSaver, and it just asks simply, what is the difference between KiwiSaver and UniSaver?
Yeah, good question. KiwiSaver itself is really good because you get extra money coming in from your employer and from the government. UniSaver is even better because you get even more money coming in from your employer, and that it's not a huge difference year by year, but over the years it's going to add up to quite a big difference. There is another point about UniSaver too, that there are two sections to it, and with one section you can get the money out when you leave the university, which is often before you turn 65, so there's more access to the money. Yeah.
And someone's asked, is there a way of splitting contributions between those two sections that you mentioned to maximise the benefit of UniSaver?
Yes, yeah. Now the ideal is that you put 3% into the UniSaver, what's it called? The locked section, which is actually, it operates very like KiwiSaver. The main difference is that you're getting more money coming in from the employer. But then there's the other section,
the standard
section, yes. And so the ideal, we reckon, is put 3% into the locked section, and then if you can manage it, put 2% into the other section, and then that way you've put 5% of your pay in total, and that gets you the maximum amount coming in from the employer of 6.75% of your pay, which is really nice bonus to get.
And significantly more than the 3% from KiwiSaver.
That's right, much more, yes.
Yeah. So most staff who join UniSaver are already in a KiwiSaver scheme.
Yes.
And one member asks, along with my UniSaver account, I contribute regularly to my KiwiSaver account, which sits with a low-fee provider.
Yeah.
Is this a sensible strategy, or should I maintain just one account in order to maximise my retirement savings?
Well, no, there's no real reason to consolidate it into one account. You can do fine having money going into KiwiSaver and UniSaver. You want to get 3% into KiwiSaver if you can manage this, and then 2% into UniSaver is the optimal way to do it. That means you're putting 5% of your pay in. Yeah. If you don't want to put more than your 3% in, it's best to then just go with UniSaver and put 3% into the UniSaver locked one, which is like the KiwiSaver one, and will get you more money from the employer.
Yeah. Except with UniSaver there's a minimum of 3, so if you're contributing to both, they've both got a minimum of 3%.
Oh, that's
so
right.
you'd be contributing 6% as a minimum, which is fine for a lot of people to do that. It's a very common strategy.
Yes, yeah.
It'd be confusing a lot of numbers with that. So we've touched on UniSaver and KiwiSaver. What other investment options do you recommend?
I don't think you need much else, actually, for most people. In most cases it's good to own your own home and pay down the mortgage, and we'll get onto that a little bit more shortly, I think. But if you've got your own home and you're paying down the mortgage and you've got KiwiSaver and or UniSaver, you don't actually need other investments. You've got wide diversification within UniSaver because of the funds, all except the lowest risk cash fund. All the other funds in UniSaver are spread over a whole lot of different companies, and so you've got good enough diversification that way.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about the conundrum of saving versus paying off a mortgage, here's a question that addresses that exactly. I recently purchased my first home. Should I reduce my contributions to pay back the mortgage faster, or continue to keep my contributions high enough to receive the maximum employer contribution?
Yes, and it's one of the most common questions I get into my I write a column in the Weekend Herald, a Q&A column, and a heck of a lot of the questions boil down to pay down the mortgage versus invest elsewhere, often in KiwiSaver. And I tend to think usually it's best to pay down the mortgage. The comparison you should be making is between the interest rate that you're paying on your mortgage and the money, the return you get on your investment. But, this is a big but, KiwiSaver and UniSaver get you extra money coming in from the government and your employer, and because of that, it beats paying extra off the mortgage. I mean, obviously you've got to pay the basics of the mortgage, but the you know, whatever the loan amount is that you but then should you pay extra off the mortgage or put it into KiwiSaver or UniSaver? And the answer is put it into Kiwi and Uni, because that extra money coming in from elsewhere makes it impossible to beat, really, as an investment. Having said that, I would put as much as it takes to get the maximum extra from someone else, i.e. KiwiSaver, it's 3%, UniSaver, it's 5, isn't it? Yes. To get the maximum from the employer, which is 6.75%, right? So you want to be putting, if you've got any extra money, put enough into UniSaver to get that 6.75%. But then beyond that, you're saying, should I put extra into UniSaver, or should I put it into paying down the mortgage? Or people sometimes say, should I put it into shares, etc. And basically, as far as that third option goes, you can be in shares through Kiwi and UniSaver anyway, and so you don't necessarily need to branch out into other types of investments except for the access.
Right.
But getting back to the comparison between paying down the mortgage and investing elsewhere, the way you need to look at that is the interest you pay on the mortgage, the interest rate you pay on the mortgage versus the return you're going to get in the investment. And the mortgage interest rates have gone, they've plunged to a very low level a few years back, remember, down about 2%, and then they soared again up to over 7%. I mean, it's been an incredibly bumpy ride, and when you're paying off a mortgage faster, so you're putting extra over and above what the bank requires in, it's like you're making an investment that gives you the same return as the interest rate. Now, that might sound a bit confusing, but back when the interest rate on the mortgages was 2%, if you paid extra off your mortgage, that's like getting 2% on an investment. So getting rid of debt that costs you 2% is the same as making an investment that gives you 2%.
And that's after tax and
that's the thing. It's after fees and taxes. And so 2% after fees and taxes is still not bad, but I must say, when those mortgage interest rates were that low, it was kind of debatable. People were saying, well, really? I think I can do better elsewhere. And that was hard to debate, and so in my column we had sort of a bit of to and froing on that. But now that mortgage interest rates have gone back up to quite a lot higher, and they're currently dropping, but I don't think anyone much expects them to get down anywhere near. There was kind of extreme stuff going on the last few years with COVID, etc. I don't think anyone, so generally speaking, it's better to, with the extra money over and above getting the maximum amount of Uni and Kiwi, is to pay extra off the mortgage. There's another advantage to that too, and that is that if you're paying extra off your mortgage and then something goes wrong in the future, like you suddenly find you've got very expensive repairs on your roof of your house, or sometimes it's a family member gets a health problem and Pharmac doesn't cover the drugs, or I mean, there's all kinds of things that happen that people don't predict, and so, or you lose your job, and suddenly you've got a bit of a financial crisis on your hands. And if you've been paying extra off your mortgage, then the mortgage lenders, I'm told, are much more willing to give you a mortgage holiday and let you pay no payments, perhaps for a very short time, or interest only, or extend the term of the mortgage, or in one way or another, they make it your mortgage
might
easier.
be in a stronger position to negotiate a way through a...
If you go in and say, hey, look, I was paying $100 extra a week off my mortgage back then.
Sure.
I kind of need a bit of leeway now. That's not to say that the mortgage lender won't do that for you anyway, even if you haven't paid extra off the mortgage, but they might. But it strengthens your argument, so it gives you a kind of security in the future. So all in all, to summarise, I think you be in Kiwi and Uni, or just Uni, to get the maximum out of the employer, and in the meantime you're getting the maximum from the government automatically coming through as well. And then beyond that, I would say get extra off that mortgage as much as you can. Yeah.
This person's obviously looking ahead and goes on to ask, if I was to change jobs, should I withdraw the unlocked portion of my contributions to UniSaver to pay down the mortgage faster?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question, because at that point, so you're leaving the university, you can get access to the unlocked section of your savings, and that money is no longer getting boosted by money coming in from the employer or the government. It's just dollar for dollar sitting there. And at that point, I would say it is quite a good idea, if you've got a mortgage, to use that money to pay down the mortgage. It's really good. It's a wonderful feeling when you've finished paying. Have you finished paying off your mortgage, Michael? Or
Just.
Have you?
Just,
yes,
yes,
not fabulous.
Yeah.
It happened to me for quite a while ago. It's a fantastic feeling, getting rid of rid of the mortgage, psychologically as well as financially.
Absolutely. Okay, here's another one that's a take on the saving versus mortgage conundrum, which I thought was interesting. This person writes in that we have a mortgage on our current house which my husband pays. I have recently returned to work and have some more cash flow. We have 2 young children and would like to plan for our retirement and also support the kids for their higher education or to buy a home. Would you recommend that we invest in a rental property, invest in stocks for the kids' future, pay off the current mortgage faster, or any other options? And just an interesting note I thought here was that this person says that to buy a rental they would need to use equity from their current home, and that they would need to top up the mortgage payments themselves on top of the rent, in order to meet the mortgage.
Which is a common situation for people. I think it's for people who have fairly recently bought a rental property and so they're still paying the mortgage on it. It's really common for them to have to top up. The rent doesn't cover the mortgage is a common scenario, and so they're having to put extra money from elsewhere and to get those mortgage payments. And in this case, they're also losing some equity in their home. So it's actually quite risky taking on rental property in those sort of circumstances. Usually it works, and it can work very well. And the people that do really well out of it often tell the world about it, and you know how I tripled my money. And I mean, the basic reason you can triple your money in a rental property is that you borrow to invest, and you get gains not only on your money but on the money you've borrowed, on the bank's money as well, and so the gains get exaggerated, and that's why often rental property does well. But there is another scenario, and a friend of a friend got into this a while back. He is a builder, and when there was a downturn, he didn't have much work, so he didn't have the money to top up the rent on his rental property, and he was looking at having to sell the rental property, and the value of properties had gone down at that time. Quite often that's the trouble. The time when you lose your job is also a time when house prices are going down. He would have lost what would have happened, would have sold the house for less than he paid for it, and the proceeds from the sale would not have covered the mortgage that was there. So he was ending up with no house, no asset, and a debt, with nothing to show for it. And so some of us got together and managed to sort of come up with some money for him in the short term, just to tide him through. But that's the kind of thing that can happen with rental property, and it's not talked about all that much. And And so a family with young children, and do you want... The other thing about rental property, and I'm not anti-property, I get accused of that sometimes, is that you've got the hassle with tenants sometimes not paying or having big parties, or and sometimes they're in a bad way. You know, they're really nice, lovely people, and they've been paying regularly, and they lose the job or something, and they come to you and say, can we please not pay? And you know, they can't pay for a while, and you're having to come up with the money from elsewhere. And or there's, you know, major problems with the maintenance of the building that you hadn't suddenly discover it's a leaky home, or there are nightmares that can happen with rental property. It can use time and energy that you don't get if you invest in a KiwiSaver or UniSaver fund or shares in general. You don't have those sort of issues, and so it complicates your life a lot. So, you know, if you want to take the risk, yes, but go in with your eyes open. Yes, on rentals.
And perhaps have some headroom that, you know, if something does go wrong there, you have got some flexibility that
absolutely,
you're not... And investing based entirely on a perfect scenario.
That's right, yes.
And another housing-related question, which I thought was really interesting, was, you know, of course, owning a home is not on everyone's radar, and someone has written in and said, my partner and I are saving for retirement, but for our own reasons we don't want to purchase a home. We're finding it hard to determine how much to save, as most guides presume home ownership.
Yes.
What advice can you give to good savers who want to stay as renters in
First
retirement?
of all, good on you for not getting caught up in the New Zealand thing where you must own your own home, because that's, in a lot of other countries, it's just, you know, apparently there's a lot of countries like Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, countries in Europe that I think in some cases not even half the people are in their own home, you know, or in a family that owns their own home. It's very common to have long-term leases there, and in New Zealand we don't have the long-term leases as much, although that's starting to happen because they're building units that investors buy and then rent out, and they're longer-term leases, I understand. And so there is nothing magic about owning your own home, and these people say they've got reasons for not wanting to, and there are all sorts of valid reasons. Somebody said to me a while back, did you have a good weekend or do you own your own home? And it's true that you know, you can get caught up in maintenance and gardens, and if you enjoy that, that's great, and if you don't, it's not great. So there's nothing wrong with not owning a home, but it's really good idea then to aim at hitting retirement with quite a lot more money, basically just because you've got to cover your accommodation until you die. Now this person's asking how much they need to therefore save, and those how much do you need in retirement questions are very open to debate. You know, I get very angry with people who say you need $1 million. If you look at the people who are saying that, they're often people who make who are going to make money out of you saving. They're perhaps KiwiSaver or other providers, or they're financial advisors, or there's somebody who's got an incentive in seeing you sitting down and investing money through them. You don't need $1 million, and in fact you don't need... I had a letter to my Herald column a while back from someone, all she was living on was New Zealand Super. She had her own unit, mortgage-free unit that she lived in, and she said, look, I get free bus rides with my senior citizen ticket thing, I go to the public library, I listen to the radio, I go for walks, I have a great life. And she had quite big health problems too, it wasn't that she didn't. So how much you need, and these people are asking how much do they need, and look, the more the better really, because it does give you more options in retirement. And so if they're thinking, well, let's aim at 300, they might want to aim at 500,000, but I wouldn't get too caught up in exactly what dollar amount to aim at. It's because there's so many assumptions. Massey University releases figures on how much you need, and it depends on whether you want, what do they call it? Sort of no frills lifestyle or a choices lifestyle.
Yes.
And it depends on whether you're in a big city or regional. And those numbers are pretty high. They base them on spending that people do, I think. But I wouldn't get too hung up on them if you're not going to get to that total. I don't think you necessarily are going to have a horrible time in retirement.
I wonder too whether some of those people that say that they need $1 million in retirement are thinking very much of living on the income from it and leaving a big inheritance. Do you think that is?
That's a really good point, Michael. Yeah, and yes, obviously, if you're only living on the returns that you're getting on the money, then you're going to need more to have the same standard of living. But whether you really are obliged to leave that much to your children is open to debate. I mean, look, it depends so much on the children's circumstances and all of that. But everyone now has heard of SKI, skiing, spend the kids' inheritance, and you can certainly do that if you travel a lot, for example. But yeah, I think if you do own your own home mortgage free, for the most part, that's a pretty good inheritance for most families to get the house, and you spend the rest of the money.
I've heard you say before that make the point that families' sizes are getting smaller and house prices are getting, going up so much that often you've got a very valuable house that is being divided by
two.
Yeah,
that's right. You leave $1 million house to two kids, $500,000 each. It's a huge inheritance, and in many cases they don't really need that much money. I mean, look, I
think there's definitely an anxiety for a lot of people about that figure, and I've got a question here that I think really illustrates that beautifully. As a single woman aged 51, I have $230,000 saved for retirement. I have no mortgage, which I've worked hard to repay. She's paying 16% to UniSaver and getting her 6.75 employer contribution. And she's saying, is this enough to retire on? I've read 500,000 is probably needed. I don't live a flash lifestyle, but I would like to have choices, and I'm aware that medical costs increase with age.
Yes, and certainly the medical stuff's true. 16% is very impressive. Well done, that person. A woman, single woman, 51, I think you said.
Yes.
I commonly find that single women in particular can save too much. It must be a basic insecurity, I think. I don't know, it's just I've noticed something that over the years from letters I've got. Now, in a way you can say, well, you can't save too much, the more the better. And that's true unless you're actually limiting your lifestyle at the moment. And if you're not having some nice holidays, or if you enjoy eating out, or if you enjoy clothes, or if you enjoy movies or concerts, and you're not doing that, because you're feverishly saving a heck of a lot for retirement. Now that's the one, I think, Michael, where you put her numbers into a calculator, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I put it into the sorted.org calculator. I didn't know what the her salary was. I just put in a reasonably modest salary of 70,000 and a real return, which we'll come to in a sec, of 3%. So,
which is pretty modest.
And put her on track for 600,000.
So she's going to retire, well, very, very roughly, with 600,000.
And that's based on those, pretty modest numbers. I think that's a good illustration of that sort of anxiety that is sort of misplaced.
Yes, and when you get to retirement, you're so used to saving that you're reluctant to spend on yourself. I had a hilarious letter have I told you about that? To my column once from this guy who said, I think he had $2 million, but said, I can't, in retirement, I can't stop myself from buying the cheapest beer, even though I hate it. He said, and he and I responded something like in the column, for goodness sake, go out and buy the more expensive beer. And he said that his wife likes going out to dinner, and they will go to the RSA sometimes, but he insists they have a drink of wine first at home because it's cheaper. And so he's being a real meanie. And I put his letter in the paper and my reply, which was to just go out and spend more, sort of thing. And his wife was reading the paper and she looked up and she said, "Look, darling, there's someone else here just like you." So he confessed it was him. But while it's kind of funny, it can get silly where people really are too mean on themselves.
Sure.
Yes, yeah.
I think there's that anxiety for people about outliving their money.
Yes.
Because we don't know how long we're going to live for.
No.
I think I've heard you talk about sort of basically preloading, that you sort of want to do the good things in early retirement while you're healthy.
While your health's good. I mean, you see it all the time, people being too frugal in their first few years of retirement and then wanting to travel, and even if they still can, but their knees aren't so good or whatever, quite often the travel insurance is terribly expensive if you've got medical problems, and if you don't declare those medical problems when you're getting the travel insurance policy, and then you have a problem when you're overseas, they won't pay up. And by the way, quite often you might declare some of your medical problems and not others, and you go overseas and something else happens that's nothing to do with the undeclared problems. The insurance company can still refuse to pay out because they'll go to your doctor and get your records once you start claiming. And so it's never a good idea to do that. But getting back to the basic point, which is you spend the money early in retirement, bias it towards that. And
Sure.
I say, I think it's fine to aim to spend all your savings by the time you're 85 or 90, because over and over again I get letters from people saying at that age, New Zealand super's enough if you've got a mortgage-free home. If you haven't, then you do need, well, it's ideal to have more, but a lot of them are saying, I just don't go out that much and I just don't spend that much.
Yeah.
So you can certainly aim at 85 or 90, spending it by then.
Sure.
And the other thing is, if you then do find you need more money and you've got that mortgage-free home, you can get a reverse mortgage, which works well at that stage in life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good thought. Just going back to, I mentioned about a real return. I've got a question here about the impact of inflation. We're told to save a certain amount to retire comfortably. If that retirement is 30 years from now, does that mean we need to save that plus whatever it's going to be in 2000 and whatever, 54?
Which is a really good point. Yeah, and yes, I mean, inflation, while it's come back down again, it looks like it's getting back down into the government's 1 to 3% range, it still does make a big difference over 20 or 30 years. It makes a big difference. So yes, you do need to save more for retirement than the bald sort of dollars show. But if you use the calculators on the Sorted website, I really recommend those calculators. If you just go onto that website and look for tools, there's a whole lot of calculators. Most of them have an inflation adjustment in them. A lot of them, it's by default, it's inflation adjusted, and you can switch off the inflation adjustment if you want to. If you just look at the bottom right-hand side, when you've completed your calculations, have a look and see if it's adjusted for inflation, and if it is, that sort of takes care of that problem.
And it's the same with the UniSaver personal retirement plan?
Is it? Yes.
Yeah, it has the same
good
function. So just looking at investments, which I thought this is another good question. I'm 60 years old and plan to work for another 5 to 7 years. My investments are 100% in growth.
Yes.
I understand it would be more sensible for me to have moved to something more conservative by now. I'm a bit reluctant to do so, but I feel I should.
Good on this person. They've got a bit of courage. So by growth, we're talking about the KiwiSaver or UniSaver funds that are usually around sort of 80% shares. I mean, you can go into funds that are all shares in KiwiSaver,
sure.
Aggressive funds. So they give you higher returns on average over the years, but they're more volatile, and so and they're the ones where you get not just drops in value, but sometimes it can halve. I mean, in the 87 share market crash, it's very unusual, but it's possible for $100,000 in a growth fund to drop to 50, and people have got to picture that. And it's not all that unlikely for it to drop from 100 to about 80. You know, I mean, that when the markets go up and down, as they did when COVID first hit New Zealand, the markets plunged and then actually recovered very fast. And they don't always recover that fast, but they do recover if you've got some time, if you can wait out until they do recover. So this person's getting near retirement and they've got their money in growth, and my basic idea is that you want to look at money that you expect to spend within 10 years and move that out of growth. And I would say put it roughly in two blocks. One block of money you expect to spend within about 3 years, put that into, I recommend it into low risk, into say cash fund, and that or even bank term deposits actually, then that money's not going to go up and down, or not very much. It can a little bit, as it did in recent years. We've seen all sorts of things in the markets in recent years, but it's not going to go up down much, so you're not in danger of right when you're starting to take money out to spend that suddenly it's dropped in value. So that's your sort of 0 to 3 year money. With the 3 to 10 year money, roughly speaking, that's good to have that in a bond fund or a medium risk fund, a balanced fund that's got some shares, some bonds, etc. in it. And then each year you might move some down as the year goes by, you know, move some down to the lower risk.
Okay.
And then the longest term money is in 10 years. It's the money you're not going to spend for 10 years or more. Leave it in growth because it will, over the long run, grow more. And if it's 10 years out, then even if we go through another 87 share market crash or some other huge, the 1929, I mean, you know, there are some famous crashes, then you've got your 10 years, and pretty much always within that 10 years, the money will come back up to where it was. So you've got time to play with. Yeah.
And just a plug for UniSaver, of course, that you can leave your money in UniSaver when you leave the university, and you can use the funds within UniSaver to do exactly the strategy and that you're talking about. Move money from growth balanced into cash, and then nominate to take money out of cash when you need money. So,
and can you set up a regular amount coming out of
yes,
cash?
you can.
Can you?
Yeah.
Yes, because that's a popular thing for people in retirement. They're getting their super coming in every fortnight, and they might get money coming in from UniSaver or KiwiSaver every other week, or whatever pattern they like. They can set up, and the money's just coming into the bank for them, which works really well. Yeah.
Yes, so basically paying yourself a pension as well as picking up the New Zealand superannuation. So I think, you touched before on travel insurance. I've got a couple of questions here on insurance. One is about life insurance. I got life insurance when purchasing a house. The mortgage is reducing while the premiums have climbed.
Yes.
Should I keep paying close to $200 a month for life insurance as a form of inheritance for my child, or would the money be better used in KiwiSaver or UniSaver?
Yeah, now, firstly, I understand that if you get a mortgage, the banks often insist on you getting life insurance or some other sort of, sometimes disability insurance, so that, you know, if you get into financial hole, there is money there to pay off the debt to the bank. So that person, before they got rid of it altogether, might want to just check their contract with their lender. But beyond that, with insurance, I say you basically want to have a look at what would happen if you did become disabled or you did die, and who needs the money and how much do they need, and it depends on your family circumstances all the time. And I mean, I can remember years ago I used to actually lecture at the University of Auckland part-time on personal finance issues for non-business students, and one of the students came to me one day and said, she was a woman of about 35 or 40, whose husband was a financial professional person, but he died with no life insurance, and she was left with, I think it was 3 or 4 kids, and she could come back to the university to try and get a decent qualification so she could make reasonable income, but she was really struggling because he hadn't left any life insurance. So what it's really important to say, I might die tomorrow. I mean, you know, people just don't think they will when they're younger, but sometimes they do. And so you've got to work through that. But if you get to a point, and often it's when the children leave home and you might or might not have a partner, but you have to just think about, if suddenly I'm not there, are things going to be okay for other people who are possibly dependents on me? Or you might have an adult child who's dependent because of health issues, you know, but just look at the scenario of, will they manage if I'm not there? And financially they often will. There's enough money there now, and so you don't need to keep paying for life insurance, and the premiums do keep going up as you get older,
sure,
because you're more and more likely to die in any given year. So it's a really good idea, and a lot of people continue to pay insurance into life insurance when they don't. I've got somebody in my column this weekend in the Herald actually where he has got, what was it, $15 million worth, I think, of assets, and he's still paying life insurance. And, you know, clearly, if he dies, the family is not going to be financially struggling. So, you know, think about that. Yeah.
Yes. It's interesting. And another question that's come in on insurance I thought was interesting, again, as you get older, about cancelling your health insurance at retirement, whether, you know, balancing affordability versus, you know, protecting your health.
It's a really interesting issue, that, because it's such a common thing for people in my age group saying to me, Mary, my health insurance premiums are soaring. And I always say to them, have you had any health problems lately, or have any of your friends your age had health problems lately? And the answer is always yes. And the premiums soar because people start getting sick or getting medical problems of all kinds as they get older. There's just a huge increase in the number of claims made, and so of course the premiums absolutely soar. And one thing to do about that, personally, I've got rid of GP coverage. So coverage when I go to the doctor, I don't have that anymore, and that reduces the premium quite a lot. But I've kept the premium for the big bad things that happen, the surgery and the specialists and all of that. And boy, when things do go wrong, and I've seen this in family and friends, when things do go wrong, health-wise, the last thing you need is for them to go wrong financially as well, you know, or to be caught in a position where to go through the state health system, you might have to wait for a long time for, say, a hip operation or a knee operation. It might be a year or more when you're hobbling around, whereas if you've got the medical insurance, you can go in and get the operation maybe in the next month or something. I mean, it makes a huge difference to quality of life. So I'm a fan of health insurance as you get older, even though it costs a lot. But when I've said that in the Herald or in my radio thing, I often get a lot of people coming back and saying, look, the state system's pretty darn good, and for a lot of people it is. I think cancer you tend to get pretty good care pretty fast for cancer from the state system, but not so much for the things that aren't life-threatening. So it's a gamble, and I personally, I think if you can possibly manage to keep up health insurance for the bad stuff, for the surgery and the specialists, do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that, you know, you may be able to modify your health insurance, as you say, by taking a just for surgery or something, and presumably with most life insurance policies you can reduce
the coverage.
That's right. So that might be an interim step. There's
a lot of flexibility, and in insurance in general, whether it be on your house or car or these ones we've already talked about, you can choose a higher excess so that you pay more of the money yourself. Like on my health insurance, I have to pay the first $500 every year, and that means that the premiums are quite a lot lower. And I can, that's not a big financial jolt to have to come up with $500. It's not like having to come up with thousands. And it's the same thing with house or contents or car or whatever. If you increase the excess, the amount that you have to pay if you make a claim, then the premiums go down quite a lot. And so that's a kind of measure of self-insurance. I don't think self-insurance as a whole is a very good idea. But people who say, oh, well, I won't pay premiums, I'll set the money aside in a bank account and cover it when things go wrong myself. And, you might do that with your car, say. You say, I won't get car insurance, I'll just instead because the premiums are quite a lot, I'll put them aside in a separate bank account and draw from that when the car crashes. If the car crashes a week after you've dropped your insurance, that's when it goes wrong, and you just don't know when it is going to go wrong. So I don't think that's good. But I think increasing your excesses so that, you are paying more yourself and therefore reducing the premiums, I think that's the way to go.
That makes a lot of sense. I think we've just got time for a few questions that have come through.
Yeah, sure.
It's a nice one. I'm young, just starting off my career working at uni. My parents signed me up to KiwiSaver when it started to get the $1,000 kickstart, which of course is thing of the past.
Yeah.
I was contributing 3% while doing part-time jobs. Now I'm contributing 10%. Now this person's at university. Should I also join UniSaver or just keep going with KiwiSaver?
Well, first of all, congratulations. That person's doing really well. I mean, the parents gave them a good start, and putting in 10% is terrific. And just by the way, that's a great thing for young people to do when they first start out and they've got no dependents. I had a letter from someone who at 23 had bought his first home, because when he first started working, he said, when I was a student, I could get by on not much money. I'm going to continue to get by on that and save just about his whole paycheck. And so I bought a house within 3 or 4 years. And this year, here's a young person saving 10%, because before they get used to having that more money coming in, if they save it, it's a terrific way to get started. Having said that, this person's not making the most of UniSaver, so they want to do what we were talking about earlier, reduce the amount going into KiwiSaver in order to get, ideally, it's 5-6.
They need to put 5%.
5% of the own pay in, because they'll get more coming in from the university than they would if they were in KiwiSaver. So put your 5 and then continue to put the other 5, because paying a total of 10, or she's paying a total of 10, put the other 5 into KiwiSaver, or either actually, yes.
And of course if that person gets to the point of wanting to buy a house, they can make a first home withdrawal from UniSaver and from KiwiSaver.
Yes.
So they can access money from both those schemes towards a first home.
So the rules are basically the same, aren't they, I think?
Yeah, it's less $1,000.
Yes,
which is a hangover from the kickstart, the days
That's
of the
right.
$1,000 kickstart.
So actually, if they are in uni and Kiwi, they'd probably have to leave $1,000 in each. But that's all right. That's not a big deal, because you've saved quite a few thousand to buy the home. Yeah.
A few questions here asking for clarification on the UniSaver contributions.
Yes.
I think be worth just addressing. Can the 3% locked savings be taken out of UniSaver only at the age of 65?
Yes.
And the answer is yes.
It's just like KiwiSaver, the locked
Yeah.
part, yes.
And it's probably worth making the point that it's currently age 65. That could change
Yes.
if the age for eligibility for New Zealand superannuation
That's
changes.
right.
You know,
Yes. But I wouldn't dwell on that. It's not going to change radically. It's, you know, if the government might make it 67 or something. Yeah. Yeah.
But there would probably be a long
lead-in period, yes. Yeah.
Yes. If you have a larger amount of money, would you recommend putting it all at once into UniSaver or KiwiSaver or another investment fund, or rather in stages? I think to preface that by making the point that you can't make lump sum contributions generally into UniSaver.
UniSaver, okay, so yes.
But you can with KiwiSaver.
Yes.
And I think what the person's getting at is, you know, if I'm putting it into a growth fund, do I put it all in at once, or you know, what?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question. What once again comes up a lot in my column, and basically you want to get it in as soon as possible, because in the meantime it's probably sitting in the bank earning less on average than it will in the growth fund. Having said that, there are two reasons why I reckon it's quite good to put, say, a third in now, a third in a month or two, and a third in the last third in another month or two later. And the two reasons are, one is that people hate it if they put the whole lot in and then suddenly 2 days later the share markets crash and the costs of the units they buy, you know, in the fund go down, and so they put all their money in at the very wrong time, and you can't tell right now whether it's the wrong time or not. You can't. You just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But it can be horrible if the markets suddenly drop right after you've gone in there, because you're buying units when you go in there.
Sure.
And if you're buying them at $2 and then suddenly you find they're only worth $1.50, it's like buying anything else for $2 and finding it's now worth $1.50. It doesn't make you happy. The other reason why I think doing it in steps, but quite close together, because you want to get the money in there basically, but the other reason is that people quite often worry that they're going to, I don't know whether I should do it right now because the markets might go down and I should wait. And so they did that and just don't do anything and stay in the bank account earning less. It's psychologically easier to break it into 3 bits and get them in and moving the whole lot in one go.
A sort of related idea around investing in term deposits.
Yes.
Too, that sometimes you can ladder it.
Yes.
Over time.
Term deposits works well. Yes, and that's something that's quite often people, perhaps in retirement or heading towards retirement, for their sort of short-term money, they put it in bank term deposits, which have earned pretty good interest in recent years, although it's coming back down again.
Sure.
But what I suggest is that people set it up. So let's say you've got $50,000, you put $10,000 in 1 year deposit, another 10 in a 2 year deposit, another 10 3, another 10 4, another 10 5, so that then you've got every year you've got some maturing, and then as each lot matures, if you don't need it to spend, renew it for 5 years. So after the first year, then you'll be renewing, and that lot will mature in 6 years. And after the second year, if you renew it for 5 years, that lot will mature in 7 years. And so you've got it set up so that every year you've got some maturing. And there are 2 reasons to do that. One is that it gives you access to some of the money, because you never know when you might need it, and rather than having it all locked up. But also, usually you're getting a higher interest for 5 years than 1 year. In recent times in the markets, that hasn't been the case. It's called the backward bending yield curve, when the interest rates are lower for longer periods. And that was happening for a while, and that was because people were expecting market rates to go down. But usually that is not the case. And so if you set up this sort of laddering thing, most of the time you're going to benefit from tying up the money for a longer period and therefore getting higher interest, but having some of it available every year.
Sure, that's a very useful idea for people that are looking
People
at
like
managing, managing their money in retirement.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the time we've got today.
Oh,
so there were, of course, more questions than we had time to answer. We will take the questions that we've received and use that as for ideas for topics for the newsletter and on the website. Mary, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and always so interesting hearing your wise words on this topic. I hope you found the webinar enjoyable and useful. Thank you for joining us. Kia pai tau rā.